Hey everybody, it's hwsteele. Today is May 18th, 2021, which makes this the third weekly video for the month of May 2021. Now this video is for all the people out there who study W.D. Gann's works and believe that there's information that's coded within the written works of W.D. Gann, his books and courses and so forth. When you decode things, it's kind of like learning to read or write. In the very beginning, when you look at a book, you don't know how to read or write. You look at it, you just see a bunch of symbols on the paper. So the reality is the written word is actually a code for you to understand. Just simply learning the sounds that the letters make, how they go together to form the words. All of that, all books in that sense are coded information. It's symbols that you're learning to associate with sounds, and those sounds associate with meanings, and then you can understand concepts and ideas that are presented within the book. Well, the coding that we're talking about is an extra layer or two or three that goes into it, and typically there's some mathematics behind it also. But the reality of it is that when you dig into Gann stuff and you start to decode it, the more of it you decode, the easier it gets to decode more of it. And as it gets easier and easier, you're able to do more and more quickly. Well, a side effect of this is when you read other things, you start to notice that, wait a minute, I'm starting to see these kinds of possible codes showing up in other written works. One that you will definitely find codes in is George Bayer, for instance, or more profoundly would be the Bible. And having the practice with W.D. Gann's decoding, you can decode those works much more easily. And one thing that you're going to notice is that the same stuff shows up over and over and over and over again. And you're going to notice it. The more you read, the more you'll notice it. There's a lot of books written. I'm talking a lot of books written by very well-known authors going back hundreds of years all the way to the present, where once you start decoding W.D. Gann's stuff and getting that practice, which allows you to spot coded stuff much more easily, you're going to realize that it's literally all over the place in written work. Now, if we go back about 140, 50 years, something like that, the photograph started to become more and more popular, which gave human beings another way to express themselves. Because pretty much if you wanted to share an idea, you had to write it down and share it that way in a letter or a book of some kind. Or you had to tell the person face to face. But once we were able to start taking pictures, we could start sharing ideas that way. And then eventually movies developed, and then movies with sound. And then, of course, television developed from that. So mankind developed another way of expressing themselves that is much closer to reality than just the written word, because that's just a bunch of symbols on paper, whereas these pictures are a very close representation, granted two-dimensionally usually, but they're a very close representation to what we actually see physically. In other words, if I take a picture of this sunset, for instance, that's pretty darn close to what it looked like in person. So once you get to the point where you've decoded enough that you can look at Gann stuff and see where there is code, most likely, and you start looking at other people's stuff that you expect to find code in, like George Bayer or the Bible, and you're finding code there, you're going to become proficient enough in decoding to be able to start to realize that it's in a lot of other places also. And that includes television and movies. Now, I've mentioned before that, for instance, Back to the Future has a lot of stuff kind of out in the open, and there's a lot of stuff hidden in there also. It goes along exactly with what Gann's stuff, what Gann teaches and what he has hidden in or coded in his informations. So if you wanted to start studying television or movies, that would be a great place to start. But the thing is, you can literally find it all over the place. There's a television show on, at least here in the United States now, called Manifest, about airplane that disappeared and reappeared like 5.5 years later. And while it's an overly dramatic show, and maybe the acting isn't the best exactly, I find that show very interesting because there's a lot of stuff that they hide in there. And it's to me, it's actually interesting to watch shows now and see, oh, look, there's something hidden there, there's something hidden there. Look at that thing. There'll be a symbol somewhere, a number somewhere. Somebody will say something. There's another show that I was just watching an episode with one of my younger family members, and something that they said reminded me a lot of W.D. Gann's permanent charts. And one of the things Gann did, like for instance, the permanent chart for the New York Stock Exchange is literally, if you look, there's 3 letters here, there's 4 letters there, there's 5 letters there, and then there's 8 letters there. If you add these all up, that's 13, 16, 20, a total of 20. Because there's 20 letters in New York Stock Exchange, the New York Stock Exchange permanent chart is really just the square of 20. So you can look that up online, W.D. Gann's permanent charts, New York Stock Exchange, and you'll see plenty of examples of it. Now, watch this clip from this television show.
I called you here to discuss where we are with Operation 225-641-4416-36324.
What?
I assigned a numerical value to each letter in the word pimento, which I then squared.
Oh, Captain, how dare you try and sneak math into this?
Peralta, update us on Santiago's undercover prison operation.
Yeah, she has made contact with Jimmy Figgis' sister, but it's slow going. I hope she comes back soon.
That clip was from a show called Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which is just a little goofy half-hour comedy show that you would never expect to find hidden or coded information in, but that show is absolutely jam-packed full of the coded information. Unquestionably, it's in that show all over the place. And I'm not trying to get you to watch the show. I'm just using it as an example because when I think of intelligent Gann-style coding, that would be one of the last television shows that I would ever expect to find anything coded in because it's such just a goofy, slapstickish kind of comedy show. And that show has a lot of stuff hidden in it, and it's usually very mathematical in nature. And sometimes it's layered 2-3 steps deep. Some shows, it's relatively shallow, where it's just a couple of surface things. Other shows, like this show that I just showed you the clip from, it's actually quite profound how well structured their coding is. A lot of times you will find television shows predicting their own future. One of the things that you'll find most frequently, or most easily maybe I should say, is when shows predict how long they're going to be on the air. This show, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, has 7 seasons completed and is going to release its 8th season. And then that will be the final season. And one of the main things that you'll find throughout, especially the first few seasons of this show, is they talk a lot about 8 years. And it's just woven into the storyline where if you're not paying attention to it at all, it doesn't mean anything to you. But when you realize that there's more information being handed to you than what's on the surface level, then it gets pretty interesting. For instance, the story arc that that episode clip I showed you comes from, they're actually, the police precinct that they work out of is in New York, and then part of the story took them to Texas for a little bit, and then a part of the end of the story, of this particular story arc, took them to Florida. And the 3 main places that W.D. Gann lived were Texas, New York, and Florida.
You'll never get away with this, Bob. Jake is on his way. He's a great cop, and he's going to save me.